Well, I'm actually really excited about this. I know my mum's also very excited about this.
Well, that's good.
Plant microbiome.
That makes two people.
Yeah. Yeah.
This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff. Now we have that out of the way, let's talk science. Paramount importance.
Anish, tell me, what is a microbiome?
So a microbiome is basically three things in one. So a microbiome is the host, the environment, and more importantly, the microbes that live in that host specific to that environment. There's a fourth bit as well. So the genes that are expressed within that system. So a microbiome basically encompasses all those things in one, and there are then specificities with what can you call a microbiome. So, there will be a microbiome with the human gut. There's plant microbiomes, which is what I work at. There's soil microbiomes. So all of those, as the name suggests, have an environment associated with them. The human gut, the plant, the soil. And then again, as the microbiome name suggests, there has to be a microbe involved or a set of microbes involved. And the genetics of it is all the genes that the microbe expresses, or the ones that are, that what we call are present in the environment. And just going a bit deeper into what would be considered like a microbiome. So bacteria, fungi, archaea, protists, viruses, all of those form microbiomes.
It's like a little ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a micro ecosystem.
Yeah.
But in terms of numbers, it's more than little, right? Because they're just numerous.
Right. And what's the difference between a gut microbiome and a plant microbiome? So it's like the types of microbes.
Yes. So obviously, our human gut is very different to the soil or the plant that the soil is growing in. But in terms of let's say just for argument's sake, I'm just going to talk about bacteria for this example. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, but with the human gut, most of the work has been done on the human gut bacteria. And what they've found is that the bacteria help us control and regulate many of our functions. So, for example, if you have a healthy gut, they suggest that they could help you with better immune system, or better nutrient acquisition. So in terms of nutrient acquisition, what I mean is, can you digest certain foods better than others? Do you react to certain foods more or less than others that have a healthy versus non-healthy microbiome? And so plants have that as well. So plants associate or have associations with bacteria, fungi, and so many things that typically the plant wants these organisms to associate with it, so that those organisms can help the plant with, for example, a better immunity, protection against pests and diseases, or even environmental stresses, for example.
Right. So this is how you have found that it benefits agricultural production.
Yes. So there's all these there's these differences, obviously, the obvious differences between the human gut and the plant environment for microbiomes, but then these similarities make it quite interesting. So we all know that in the last few years, the social media, but even mainstream media And from an academic point of view, the number of publications that have come out that have deciphered the human gut and the functions of the human gut microbiome have just increased exponentially. And so there's a lot of just global understanding. And so these days it's great as a plant soil microbiologist that I can talk to people, and the first example or the first analogy I give them is, you've heard of the human gut microbiome, and everyone goes, yes, we have. So what that means is we've understanding the benefits of the bacteria that live within us. And then it's easier for me to then go and talk to someone and say, well, you recognize that the bacteria that live within us provide us with all these benefits. So can you now think that the bacteria and the fungi that associate with plants can also provide the plants with all these beneficial properties?
Right. So bringing up the nutrients out of the soil. Does the soil microbiome, like, it's obviously interacting with the plant microbiome, is it? Or are they two different separate areas which gets looked at?
So they can be separate or, I guess, interconnected depending on your context. So a soil in general, even if it doesn't have any visible plants growing in it, will still have a microbiome associated with it, because those are just organisms that live in that environment. But if you put a plant in it, there's likely you're likely going to induce some changes within the soil, but also within the plant. So the plant imposes what's called sanctions on the bacteria or fungi that live in the soil. And like I said earlier, it wants to recruit. So we, as humans and even animals, have a microbiome. We move around. We're mobile, and we move around in different environments, and we eat food that comes from all these different places. So our microbiome is dynamic, but it's also being acquired by our behaviors. A plant is immobile. So how does it acquire? It releases these things called root exudates from its roots. And these chemicals are what attract or stop certain microbes from coming into the plant roots.
What are the microbes that the plants want? And what are the ones that they don't want?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, because we're all obviously imparting some sense of knowing to the plant, some sentience to the plant. And we are kind of looking at it from a human mindset and emotion point of view. But in actuality, plants have evolved with microbes for over millions of years. No plant evolved that was devoid of a microbial ecosystem within it or around it. So then, to answer your question, what do plants want? Well, they want to grow, they want to reproduce, and they want nutrients. I guess to grow and reproduce. And I'm not saying that microbes are solely responsible for the plant to be able to do those things, but the microbes do help the plant with those functions and others.
So how does a soil become unhealthy in its microbiome, and how do you help it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So again, there have been several reports of soil degradation throughout the world, from several different angles again. So, for example, heavy metal accumulation, because we haven't been dumping our rubbish appropriately, and so there's all these pollutants that are then leaching into agricultural soils, or even non-agricultural soils, even natural ecosystems, for example. Another reason why soils, particularly in this regard with agriculture, why they would start becoming degraded or unhealthy, is if we keep on pumping them with a lot of fertilizers and sprays and all of these chemicals that the soil just doesn't need that many of. So that would cause it to be unhealthy.
What are the fertilizers? A lot of Isn't fertilizer supposed to like increase the soil health?
Yes. So fertilizers are meant to put back nutrients into the soil that have been depleted for various reasons.
So that can be killing the microbiome.
It can be because of the dosage. So it's similar to, again, I'm probably going to be making these analogies constantly because most of the people are more aware of human health.
No, please do. It's for me. I'm just trying to imagine it because it's obviously we're dealing in a world that's microscopic, and I don't deal in a world with microscopic. So I'm trying to like put everything in my head and trying to like imagine it like a picture. So analogies is helping.
Great. So, we take medicines for various ailments that we have, or even when you take just supplements for multivitamins and all of that stuff. But you just can't keep on pumping your system with those things. If you do that, eventually you're going to start feeling sick or having some other symptoms that were different from the original problem, which caused you to take those supplements or that medication. And so obviously there are other things, but our microbiome is more than likely reacting to all of these things that we're putting into our bodies. So similarly, in a soil, we think it needs more nitrogen and more phosphorus and more potassium to increase its fertility. And we just keep on putting it in. And then we keep on growing plants that then take some of that up. But what we are doing at the moment is we are sacrificing this balance of what is a healthy soil for increased productivity.
Right. Okay. Can you please elaborate more on that?
So the idea of this increased productivity is the more NPK, so that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are the three kind of main
so this
elements.
Is not like if we're talking say wheat, it's not the grade of the wheat, right? I mean, that's like the level of nutrients per grain versus another grain. Or like, how a certain wheat goes to pasta, some goes to bread, some goes to just cattle feed. I'm assuming the microbiome definitely affects that. But when you're talking about productivity, is it amount or is it like the grade?
Yeah, I'm talking more of the quantity rather than quality. So what you mentioned there about the grade is obviously a qualitative trait. Whereas I'm talking productivity in the sense that, I want, instead of half a ton a hectare of wheat, I want 3. And so how am I going to get that? And the first thing that we end up doing is, well, I know that nitrogen helps the plants grow bigger and better. And so do these other minerals like phosphorus and potassium and calcium and everything. So why don't we just load the soil in with that and the plants are going to take it up and grow? But there's a plateau. They can't just keep on taking whatever you put in up. And there's an upper limit to their growth as well. So more isn't equal to better always.
No, because am I understanding it right? It's been saying like it can become like if you get more, but it could be just like more empty of nutrients on a health perspective, or isn't like going back to the grade, like if you.
I guess it could be. I'm not sure if I can comment on the quality of the produce.
Okay.
Just because we've been adding more inputs into the soil.
Yeah. Okay.
And part of the reason I can't comment on that is because I personally haven't done that work. Also, I haven't read enough about
agricultural science is so complex. Like it's one of the main. It's probably the main part of this university. I'm assuming is the size of agricultural science here is huge, way bigger than any other area. I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the amount of research that goes into it and how complex and diverse it is wild. Like just hearing this is blowing my mind. Your PhD focused on the microbiome of legume nodules, looking at edaphic factors, which is like mainly pH, acidic what is and its influence on microbial recruitment. Firstly, I want to know what a legume is, and then let's elaborate further on that.
Sure. So yes, my PhD I did it on legumes, which in this case were clover species. So legumes are, for example, like the common legumes that we all know and actually eat on pretty much a weekly basis, if not daily basis, are beans, peas, what else? Soybeans. They're all considered legumes. So not considered. They all fall into the family of legumes. And what makes legumes quite special as a plant species is that they have evolved with these bacteria called nodulators or nitrogen fixers, and they form this symbiotic relationship with these bacteria. So I think we understand what a symbiotic relationship is, but I'll just explain it. It's when two organisms mutually coexist because each of the organism gets something from that relationship. So in this case, the bacteria that associate with the roots of these legumes get carbon from the roots and the plant. And the plant gets nitrogen. So there's a whole complex biochemical process that happens in these specialized structures called nodules that are formed in the roots when these bacteria associate themselves with these legume plants. And within this nodule, this magical reaction happens where nitrogen directly from the atmosphere is fixed in a bioavailable form into the roots. So these are your biological fertilizers. Yeah.
I see, because I see now a lot of like wheat crops, they're planting them with I think it was soybeans or like other legumes, I'm assuming, to like help the soil and the wheat crop.
Yes. So so that's like an example of either crop rotation or mixed cropping, where they may have one row of soybean and another row of wheat, for example. And what that does is that row of legumes that you planted will have these associations with these bacteria that fix nitrogen. And they're not just fixing the nitrogen directly into the plant. Some of that nitrogen is also being fixed into the soil. So then that nitrogen can then become bioavailable to other plants as well.
Because our soils, like there's a finite amount of time you can put a crop in an area. And our soils, like globally, are becoming worse, right? Because we've just been, especially in like European countries, like the amount of agriculture that's gone there for millennia, it's slowly getting worse and worse. And then like, we getting to the stage that you won't be able to plant crops? And then...
So there's been a claim that we only have about 60 harvests left.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I've heard. Actually, I heard it on Clarkson's farm.
Yeah. So I don't remember exactly where I heard this, but it was from a verified source, and I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But this number of 60 harvests is pretty scary. Because you think, what does that mean? I mean, that kind of means
60 years.
Well, actually, more than that. It's several generations that we're still, a few generations that we can still support with the current land and the way of production that we have. There are a few maybe issues with that calculation. Now, I don't know how close it is. Like, do we have more or do we have less? And the scary thing would be if we have less than 60. And the reason I think we may have less than 60, or we could have less than 60, is if we keep on intensifying agriculture in areas where it's actually just not natural to grow things.
Right. What's that, like kind of like wheat belt kind of thing or what do you mean? Or like you're putting a plant, like a tropical plant, in a temperate area, or vice versa kind of thing?
Kind of, but you're forcing, so then you want to force that environment and that system to then start producing this plant for you.
Okay. Yeah. I can. So I'm assuming it would be like more like a temperate species in a tropical area, and then you got to have heavy irrigation, fertilizers, and all that.
Yeah, all of that. So you're reliant on all these external inputs to then be able to produce enough of that plant, the harvest that you're going to get out of it.
So what's the limiting factor? Like, why is the soils? It's the soils that's stopping this harvesting? Well, whether we've only got 60 harvests left.
Essentially, yes.
Is it the microbiome? Like, we're running out of polluting the microbiome, or is it the type of nutrients, or like, and if it's nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, aren't like the nitrogen fixing plants like legumes and all that putting it back in there? Or why is it like, or is it just like it's kind of like a Band-Aid on a big wound? What is this limiting factor?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in everything that you said, right? So it's unfortunately the answer to this is it's complicated. And
I'm sure there's no easy fix otherwise.
Yeah, but when people hear that it's complicated, they think, oh, that's such a cop-out answer. But it is true in the sense that, but I'll elaborate why I think it's complicated. So it's not just that the microbes are dying, or that we have completely changed the microbial environment by either by intensifying agriculture. It's not just that. That is one of the factors in the equation. Soil nutrients is a big one as well. So there have been reported measurements of intensification really depleting certain minerals from that area. So that goes back to what you said about soil nutrients.
And we can't just go to a new area. Like,
well, we have a finite amount of land that we have available, right? I mean, unless we completely revolutionize the way that we are farming, which may happen because technological advancements are pretty amazing, and we've come a long way in human history to get to this point where we can feed 8 billion people. So I think there's hope. There's things to look forward to, that we may have really amazing technological advancements that help us produce food in either a soil-less system, which is being done, like hydroponics are around, but I don't think hydroponics are enough to feed the growing population. So yeah, how do we figure out how to grow plants in a better way, in a more efficient way? We can. It'll take time, but we can. Then what you said about the legumes, right? Like, the legumes are there, so why are they not fixing all this nitrogen that's freely available in the atmosphere into the soil? Well, they are, but we're not planting legumes all the time. Legumes aren't really as valuable, maybe apart from soybean, which is a cash. It's considered a cash crop these days, whereas it didn't used to be. But there are many other legumes in the family. But you wouldn't. I mean, a farmer isn't just going to stop producing wheat, for example, for a legume when they know that the legume isn't going to earn them the same per hectare than the wheat crop is.
So how do you go about convincing farmers about this? Like, how like, surely this is a big struggle then because if it needs to, well, they need to be able to get profit off it. They need to be able to, or a value of it somehow. But what's stopping them from like just depleting their soil? I guess, I don't know, in the way they're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, what is this a big struggle that's?
Well, yes and no. So I also think, I mean, farmers get a lot of stick, right, for how they're doing things, not necessarily what they're doing, because we all value agriculture. We all value farmers because we know that society needs food, and farmers are the producers of that food that we eat. But they still fall under a lot of scrutiny for the right or the wrong reasons. And to be fair, a lot of farmers are doing the right thing or want to do the right thing. They don't. I don't think any reasonable grower out there, wants to deplete their soil of all the nutrients and conduct these farming practices in a totally unsustainable, unmanageable way. But money is a big driver. Profits is a big driver. So how do we go about convincing people to farm differently? Well, so the same documentary that mentioned the 60 harvest issue also mentioned mixed cropping. So monocultures are a pretty big negative in farming systems. And mixed cropping can really help put that soil fertility back into the system, because you can then use different crops that you don't necessarily want to harvest for whatever they're producing, but you want to then incorporate them back into the soil, so they add all these nice green manure and nutrients back in for your actual cash crop. So you either do a mixed cropping where you sacrifice a bit of your land for your real crop, for these other species of plants that still confer a lot of benefits to the soil and to your next harvest. So yeah, I think the challenge is just trying to explain to them that you might see short-term dips in profit, but in the long run you'll be away laughing.
Yeah, the long-term, short-term pain for long-term gain in a sense.
Yes, but we also have to be cognizant that not everyone is in a position to be, to take on these short-term losses, so to speak. Even if if I went to them and said, if you change the way you're doing it, if I went as a microbiome expert, I'm not an agronomist, so I can't give them that advice, but you might not see the same gains that you're seeing for the next 3 years, but after that you will. Not many people, you can imagine, would be willing to just jump on board that unless you had a plan B. If this was your only plan, then you're like, hold on, so you're telling me that I am going to make less money for 3 years, but then maybe I'll see an increase after that?
So what's this plan B?
No, if you had a different business, or you could diversify from a different thing, and you could maybe recover those losses from something else.
Do you work with farmers in terms of microbiome and trying to improve their soils and?
I guess not directly, but with the project that I'm currently working on, we're studying the microbiomes of 3 horticultural crops, so tomatoes, potatoes, and avocados. And a lot of the work, if not all of the work that we are doing, is field-based work. So we're going out to different farms and sampling soil and roots and different parts of the plants, to trying to understand which bacteria and fungi associate with these plants in different environments under different conditions. So we're actually getting help from farmers to go and sample from their farms, rather than us directly helping them at this point, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can you translocate the microbes and then start so I don't say for an area that's really bad, and then start moving and then in a way grow them?
Yeah, I love that question, because that's something that is being done in other groups around the world, where so it's called soil transplantation. So and again, I'm going to use an analogy. So with the human gut, this might sound a bit disgusting to most people, but there was a concept or a term that was coined a few years ago called repopulation. And
repopulation.
repopulation.
Okay.
So repopulation was something that was done for the benefit of human health, where they took a healthy person's poop bacteria
Yep.
and transplanted that in a safe and sanitized way to an unhealthy person, and they saw a change, an increase, a betterment in the unhealthy individual as a pretty much a direct result of that microbiome transplant. So with agriculture or horticulture, we can do that. If we characterize a soil, so in this case, say, I've been going out to avocado orchards, and we noticed that these particular avocado trees have a really good soil that is associated with them, good in terms of nice nutrients and also a really diverse and healthy soil microbiome. We can take that soil and transplant it to a different unhealthy tree in the hopes that the beneficial microbes would then proliferate and sort of take over and help that unhealthy tree.
Does a tree need to be like of a certain species? Like,
I mean, at this stage, it would make sense that you took it from. So from this example, it's like if I take it from an avocado, I'll put it on another avocado. We don't know. I mean, maybe there is some research that's been done like interspecies transplants, and that could also confer some benefits. But we also know from research that there's a concept of a core microbiome. So what is a core microbiome? That is a set of microbes, so all sorts that I mentioned earlier, that almost always associate with a given plant species. So that species will have, these bacteria and fungi that are not unique to it, but that it will always be associated with it. So regardless of where you grow it and when you grow it, it will have those.
right.
But it will have others as well.
So if a soil, so there's, I got the question in my head, but trying to, so is there the microbes that are specific for a plant, like, are they always in the soil? Like, say if we've just switched a plant over because they've got specific microbes to that plant, to that species you're saying, and then what if you just put a new type of plant in this soil? Is that soil got dormant microbes for that plant, or is it like, I'm guessing it's always attached to that plant? Like, well, how does that plant then survive in a new soil? I know when we, like, my mum has, like, I guess translocated plants for her garden, whether the trees or whatever. We've always, like, you had to take like a large amount of soil from where you've taken them to plant it in there, and that's obviously because of the microbes. But like, how, like, is these, when the seed falls down and blows off with the distance, like, how does it know that that's microbes are in that soil? Or
Yeah, so I'm going to start with that last one, right? So the last one, you said if a seed blows off and falls somewhere, and well, obviously it doesn't know what, which conditions it's going to germinate in. And again, I'm using the word know because we're imparting these human thoughts into a plant. Anyway, besides the philosophical implications of that, the life within a soil, so microbial life within a soil, is vast. It's unimaginably vast. So there are all sorts of bacteria, viruses, fungi, all different organisms that live in a soil. And different soils do have different community compositions. So not all soils have all organisms. And even if they do, the numbers or the abundance of these organisms may be quite different. So, you might have A, B, C, and D in two different soil types, but A might be really high in soil type 1 and very low in soil type 2.
Mm. And this is sort of saying like A is the microbes that are specific to, let's say, a jarrah forest, and B is specific for a carry forest. And that's how sort of, is that how you get like, say, forests of I'm just going to say these types of eucalypt trees. Like you don't get a mix of like jarry, carry, marry that much. It's like you get a forest of this because there's other microbes in that soil that sort of specific.
Not entirely.
No,
So that could
okay.
be one of the reasons why that happens, but I wouldn't think that that would be the entirety of the reason. So you need to think about how these plants disperse their seeds as well. And if you already have a clump of trees of species of one species, so eucalypt for example, they will disperse their seeds within that area so that more of them will grow and proliferate and stuff. And also there's competition as well. So if a certain tree species lives in a certain area, it's probably adapted to that area and it's probably likely to outcompete other species from growing there.
Mm.
So it's not all regulated by the microbes, but it is this very complex interaction that happens. And like I said, all plant species, so trees and everything else has co-evolved with microbes for millions of years. So they do have a set of microbes that almost always associate with them. Now, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows this, whether the competition between plant species is just plant genetic related, or is it also because of the microbes and the genetics of the microbes that come into play. But just going back to what you asked me first about, say, this seed that falls into a soil and it grows, but it's never grown there before, or this plant doesn't normally grow in that soil. How is it going to survive? So obviously it will require nutrients in there for it to grow initially and germinate and stuff. It could survive or it couldn't. If we're just talking from a microbial point of view, if there's a weirdly high load of a pathogen that negatively affects this particular plant species, then it's probably just gonna die. But if there isn't a pathogen that specifically negatively affects that plant species, and there's all sorts of other benign bacteria or fungi in there, then it's likely that the plant is just going to grow fine. And going back a wee while when I mentioned about these root exudates that plants secrete from their roots, they are very important in recruiting bugs that help the plant and stopping bugs that don't help the plant.
Right. So the soil microbiome helps for insects.
Sorry, I shouldn't say bugs as in, sorry, microbes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I use bugs as a very, very loose term there. Microbes.
Yeah. Okay.
So root, yeah. I think we should talk about a little bit about root exudates though, because these are fascinating. They're very complex chemicals that the plant releases into the soil, and we know from a lot of research that they are pretty much the most important agents for recruiting certain organisms or even hindering others. So the root exudates provide a food source for these microorganisms, but they also have these signaling compounds that sort of do a bit of a lock and key function. So root exudates might have a signaling compound that completely has been co-evolved to attach to another key that a certain bacteria possesses. So if that bacteria is around, that lock and key mechanism is going to click into place, and it's just going to link in next to that root and be associated with that plant. So plants kind of, I guess this is very interesting, plants know which organisms it wants around it and which it doesn't. And so over all of this evolutionary time, it has evolved these compounds that it releases that goes, actually, I need more of these kind of organisms that's going to help me from either protecting against this pathogen or this nutrient deficiency in the soil or some other stress.
We're talking like the plants is sentient, but
Yeah, but to be fair, there is no evidence for or against this.
no, well, that's where all based the TV show The Last of Us, I think.
Yeah. So we're going a little bit. It's philosophical, but it's also a bit science fiction where we don't know, and it's pretty hard to also qualify what real sentience is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I know a lot of people try and, well, you can look at any animal, right? What's the level of it compared to. But going back to the plant, how do you say exudates? Exudates. Right. So it's obviously very complex, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
You and me both.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, I've got no hope then. So, like, does that mean like other plants can speak to other plants in a way?
Yes. So there have been reports or maybe even evidence of these signaling compounds that plants do interact with each other.
Right. Not just as in like a parasitic plant. Like I know we've got like the snotty gobble, which I know just grows off another plant. Is there like symbiotic relationships like this, or is it?
Yes. Are they?
Like, is it like parasitic, or is it just like they're both?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of any examples at the moment that two plants want to coexist together for each plant's benefit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there must be some.
I guess this is probably going a bit out of your research area.
A little bit out of my research area, but I'm sure, like if we're talking about signaling compounds, then there has been evidence of plant to plant signaling or communication.
That's crazy. And I will jump back now to agriculture. How does the microbiome help benefit agriculture? So you said it's like a high net productivity. How does it like help combat in, say, like the face of climate change, and like what are we finding? Is it like, actually I do have another question which it kept coming up in my head before, which I'll come to later, but yeah, so climate change, is it just like the wetness of the soil, or like what's like, because obviously less rain in a lot of areas, sometimes too much rain, but how is the microbiome, the research you're doing, helping like combat that stuff? Sorry, it's a very broad question.
Yeah. So again, there's a few things to sort of tease apart here. I know you haven't asked me this, but the flip side to this is climate change affecting the soil microbiome, and can we improve the soil microbiome to help us combat climate change? Do you understand? There's
right. So like
2 points here. So
yeah. So is it like increasing the plant's productivity of sequestering carbon?
For example,
I'd never thought of it like that. When I was reading these questions, that's not how I interpreted it. But that's okay. Please tell me more.
So yeah, the first point that I mentioned was with all the anthropogenic changes that we've made that's causing climate change, is that negatively or positively impacting soil microbes? And I think yes, probably both. It's context dependent. But if you ask me, how can we use microbiomes in general, not just soil but microbiomes in general, to combat climate change? And one great example is the one that you already mentioned, carbon sequestration. So they've found many bacteria that help sequester carbon directly from the environment into the soil, but they're also ones which then can associate with plants and help the plants sequester carbon in a more efficient way. So then we're reducing that impact of carbon dioxide. another way, and this is could be a bit of a stretch, but it's still a way in which microbes or microbial technology can help at least not accelerate climate change. So we know that intensification and a lot of agricultural practices are responsible for many of the problems that we're seeing environmentally. Uh, like greenhouse gases and all of this stuff. So if we reduced our reliance on chemical fertilizers and all of these synthetic inputs like chemical, pesticides and all of that, and I'm not saying stop it, I'm saying reduce our reliance on it, and then the reduction that we make, we increase that on the microbial side. So
Is it naturally increase? Are you saying you need to increase the microbial side?
Yeah, so any reduction in, so I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, for numbers, if you made a 20% reduction in the amount of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides that you put on your crops, but you made a 20% increase in the microbial microbial inoculants that you started using, or biological or natural products that you started using.
Can I quickly ask what a microbial inoculant is?
Yeah, so a microbial inoculant is either one species of an organism, of a microbe, or a consortium of different bacteria or fungi together that you inoculate or you add to the soil to benefit the growth of those plants or to benefit the health of that soil.
How do you do that? Is it like in a bottle?
Or well, at the moment you can buy these things that are called, biological products, and biological products come in a whole lot of different shapes and sizes. In the sense that a biological product could be, for example, plant-based, so it's got a lot of plant-derived nutrients in it. It could also be entirely microbial based, so it will be a liquid or a granular fertilizer that actually has a lot of different good bacteria and fungi packed inside it, alongside some nutrients that are beneficial to the plant. And then you can add these to the soil, and well, with the idea that these microbes are then going to start proliferating in the soil, and those nutrients that you've added together with the microbes are going to all help the plant grow better.
Is this able to be done on a large scale?
Yes, so
that's not extremely expensive?
Well,
like I know fertilizer itself is expensive.
Fertilizer is expensive
in comparison to fertilizer.
And I haven't looked at the economics of how, on a large scale, of how cost effective these microbial inoculants are going to be as opposed to fertilizers. But I think this goes back to what we said earlier of how can we change our practices, or how, by we I mean farmers, how can we need to be able to facilitate all these other alternatives, right? So you can say, fine, we're not saying don't use fertilizers, but maybe use less of them, and then for the reduction that you make in the fertilizer that you use, maybe increase these other biologicals that are available to you. And so, cost-wise, you might be spending roughly the same as what you were spending before, but if you keep on doing this and you slowly reduce so it would be like opposing graphs. One line is going down whilst the other line is going up. So your synthetic inputs are going down, but your microbial or your biological inputs are going up slowly. And I'm convinced that over time you will see an increase in soil fertility, but you'll also see a decrease in costs.
Okay. Yeah. Short-term pain for long-term gain. Again. Cool. Yeah. This is spinning me out. Like, there's so much I did not know about, I guess, under my feet. Would be.
Well, it is pretty much literally under your feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it? I would have this in my head for the whole day. Is there microbes, microbiome in like dry soil, Or is it like mainly and it has to be like quite moist? Because like is breeding the right way? They are. You said they called them bugs, so they have to be breeding in some way, right? Is it asexual, sexual breeding, or is it like, yeah? My main question is like, is it mainly only in like damp soils? Like I know Australia's got some really dry climates and dry soils. That has to be there because there's plants there, right?
Yeah, so I would be very surprised if you didn't find microbes in even the driest of soils. So they're probably living there because they've been adapted to those conditions. So I'm sure if you went in the middle of the Sahara Desert, for example, you lifted some of that sand from the ground and you cultured it, you probably find some bacteria or fungi growing from there. So they have obviously evolved in these super dry conditions over how many millennia, and so you will find them, but you will find that it will be a very different community of microbes living in that environment as opposed to a tropical rainforest, for example. Your communities are going to be like, the night and day. So
say if a drought came through, does that like just kill off the microbiome in the soil? Like if like a very, very severe drought, and then like, or in a way, I wouldn't say like kill it off completely, but it would deplete it a lot, right? And then the plant would then really struggle for nutrients and everything, not just as well as obviously water. But is that sort of what happens, or
it definitely could happen? I mean, but microbes are amazingly resilient as well. So they've been like, because we know that certain environments undergo very rapid wetting and drying cycles. Particularly extreme environments which just undergo a lot of inundation from rain, but then for a few months they'll be dry as a bone. So again, I haven't really, this isn't that extreme microbiome research isn't my area, but I'm pretty sure there will be organisms that like you said deplete, but they wouldn't go extinct, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the numbers might come down a lot, but given the right conditions, those numbers can easily go back up. We also have to remember that microbes reproduce at a rate that's unprecedented from a human point of view, right? These things will go generations in the span that we've been talking. So for them to get their numbers back up, it will take a matter of hours, not years.
Right, that's crazy. So, I guess then, can the gardener, like a home gardener with their own garden, they can improve their soils? Would they have to buy specific inoculants, or like how can a home gardener, like, because we obviously a lot of your work's in big agricultural areas. Can a home gardener do the same to help their soils and plants grow at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like, yeah, you're not wrong that a lot of the work that I am doing or that I have done in the past has been on this larger, more commercial scale. But really, the idea is this transferability, that we want this research or this type of work that can be done by anybody. And yeah, so you can go out and just buy these commercial products, but the problem is that there's too many. The market for what is called biological amendments is huge, and it's just increasing. And unfortunately, there are a lot of so-called snake oil salesmen out there as well, which is people who are selling stuff that claim to have certain benefits, but actually all you're doing is buying expensive fertilizer that's being labeled with an organic or a bioorganic
Temu special
brand, something like that.
Yeah.
So I guess, yes, you can go out and buy these things, but like anything these days, it's important that you do your own research and look at how long this company has been around, what sort of claims are they making, who has endorsed these claims, is it scientific, is it scientifically rigorous, the experimentation that's gone behind all that product development and testing. Do they say that we've actually had independent testing? Because that would be great if they do. And I'm sure a lot of these, a few of these companies do claim those. So yes. So there are ways of the average home gardener going out and buying all these like nice biological products. But another thing that you can do without spending a whole lot of money initially to just go out and buy is diversify. So plant diversity is really good for a nice diverse soil microbiome as well. And diversity, we talk about diversity in all senses, right? Like everyone is aware that sort of, I mean, this could be wrong, but generally more diversity is better. That's the understanding that we all have.
No, I can't see how it can't be wrong.
Yeah, but generally, maybe there are some examples where it could be bad, but generally we all agree. So that is true for your soil microbial diversity as well. But if you diversify your above ground, so plant different crops together, obviously seasonal dependent, you should have a nice thriving, diverse microbial ecosystem underneath as well, which I can't see how that's going to harm your soil fertility.
That's that question was for my mum. Help out with her garden.
There you go, Kat's mum.
Yeah. If funding and time was no issue, what is your dream project?
Funding and time was no issue. I think I'd pick, say, one crop, and that's probably going to be the hardest. Or which crop do I pick? And at the moment, I would say maybe I'd choose tomatoes, partly because I love tomatoes, and go in and travel the world and go to all the places that tomatoes are produced, which I'm pretty sure is most of the world, and really understand the different genotypes of the tomatoes, so all the different varieties of tomatoes that are produced and the microbiomes that associate with these things, but really fully characterize what are the different stresses that these plants are grown in, what are the inputs that the farmers are using, or even home gardeners, and how the microbiome really changes based on all of those different scenarios. So
right.
it would be a massive project, but again, like you said, if time and money wasn't an issue, because I think if I was doing this on my own, it would take me easily a lifetime, and probably more than a lifetime worth of money to do this, because it would be a mammoth undertaking, in the sense that there would be so many different tomato varieties out there, and I wouldn't just be looking at the soil that the tomato is growing in. I'd also be looking at the roots themselves, maybe the leaves, and probably even the fruit. And all of these, we haven't talked about this at all in the question so far, but each plant has all of these things that are compartments. So a leaf is a separate compartment from the root, the stem,
compartment
the fruit.
For what?
Well, they're just like areas of the plant, right?
Yeah.
Is what I'm referring to as compartments. So like our eyes and our nose and our hands are all different parts of us. But each of those different compartments or parts has a microbiome that's associated with it. So fruit wouldn't necessarily have the same bacteria and fungi that are present in the root of the same plant. I'm not even talking about the same species. I'm talking about the same individual plant here.
Crazy. So how do you go about like looking at that? What's the healthiest to increase in a plant, or like to culture, I guess? Like, are you wanting to focus on the soil or the roots or the stem, like leaves, fruit? Like, what's your steps? What are you looking at method wise? Like,
as in, what am I doing right now, or are we going back to my dream project?
No, to the dream. Back to
the dream.
Yeah.
That's why I said I'll look at everything. So I will look at the soil, the roots, the stem, the leaves, and the fruit. And all of those, so how many compartments did I mention there? I think 5: soil, roots, stem, leaves, and fruit. 5 compartments across I don't know how many.
Why is it important to look at all of them?
Because I would want to understand what the changes are in the microbiome associated with each of those compartments, and whether that's actually related to the environment that the plant is growing in, or the management practices that the farmer is doing to the soil, you know, or also the plant genotype itself. So all these varietal differences between different tomatoes, is that an influence on which bacteria and other microbes associate or disassociate with the leaves of the fruit? And we also know from a fruit point of view is that microbes do impart a flavor profile to certain things. So they've done these kind of studies on grapes because there's more money.
Wine's
there's more
probably
money.
the most,
yeah,
yeah.
wine. So they've at least tried to do these correlations that if these microbial communities are present with these grape varieties, then that equals a better flavor profile. So yeah, I think that's why I'd want to do all of those things to try and understand flavor, health, resilience. And resilience is, in terms of, is it, are these microbes helping the plant be more resilient towards environmental stresses or even biological stresses like pathogens and diseases?
What are the major stresses for microbes?
For microbes or for the plants?
Well, I guess if the plant loses the microbes, then it's under huge stress anyway.
Yes, if the plant loses all of the beneficial microbes, then it's probably not going to be able to survive, which is the biggest stress that you can imagine.
So, what is for microbes the biggest stresses for microbes?
Oh, there's a lot, but again, unfortunately, that's very context dependent, right? So if a microorganism has evolved to live and thrive in a certain environment, and then you change that environment, then that would be a stressful environment for it. So, for example, a microbe has been living, a particular species of bacteria has been living in this soil for forever, but this soil has never had any cadmium contamination. So cadmium is a heavy metal, but all of a sudden there's an industry that actually releases some cadmium waste, and that goes into that soil. Those microbes aren't going to be able to adapt quickly enough to that change that's happened, and so they're probably going to disappear from that soil.
What, like, you looked at pH?
Yes.
A lot. How does the soil become? Is it acidic or is it alkaline?
So soils can be acidic naturally. They can also be basic naturally, so alkaline. Again, it depends on the soil, where it is, also what's growing in it, and also how we have modified the soil. So you can make an acidic soil alkaline by putting a whole lot of lime on it. And a lot of farming systems do that. I think here in WA, many places do lime their soils because the soil acidity is an issue here, partly because our soils get very dry, and so that's one of the reasons why acidity can go up. So soils aren't naturally, they're naturally either acidic or alkaline depending on the soil, where it is, what's growing in it, all of these things. But how does that relate to the microbes that are living in it? So there's been a lot of research done, particularly on bacteria, with soil pH. So soil pH is considered one of the strongest drivers of bacterial communities. So they're very sensitive to small changes in soil pH.
Is this like point something?
Yeah, we're talking about sort of pretty much points, a few decimal points. We also have to remember that the pH scale is a logarithmic scale. So what we consider a 0.1 difference is actually, from a chemical point of view, it's quite a large difference.
Okay.
So because pH is really the measure of hydrogen ions in the system.
Yeah.
So the more acidic a system is, the more hydrogen ions it has. And the less acidic it is, the less hydrogen ions it has.
Okay. This is going back to my chemistry days.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I don't really want to go into the chemistry side of things today, but yeah.
No. Okay.
But that's, so the pH scale, I mean, we are measuring it obviously from our perspective, right? Like we've come up with this pH scale that goes from 0 to 14, 0, 1 being very acidic and 14 being super alkaline. Bacteria can only most bacteria can only tolerate a very narrow range of pH. There are some bacteria that are called extremophiles that live at either extreme. So they're really specialized at living at pH, for example, 12, which is super high, super alkaline. But there are also some that live in pHs, as low as 3 or so, which is also very acidic. That's more acidic than your lemon juice, for example. But for the most of them,
I think it's corrosive after 3, isn't
something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're organisms that not just live, but they actually thrive in those environments. So they are called extremophiles. But for the most part, they have a very narrow range of pH that they live and survive in. And any changes to that is really going to disrupt the...
How narrow is this narrowness? Because I remember Mum measuring the pH in her garden. And I don't know how she did it. If she sent off soil samples, I would assume she would have probably done that because she's not a chemist at all.
Yeah.
So
how narrow is the range?
Yeah.
Well, it's normally anywhere between, say, I don't know, 5 and 7 or 5 and 8.
Okay.
But that's a huge range. So we're talking about 3.
Yeah.
But the reason why, again, it's not a very easy question to answer is because there's so many different types of bacteria and fungi that live in the soils, right? So then everyone has their own niche preference. And so it's very difficult to classify or narrow down that narrow range even more. But if we start talking about individual species of bacteria or fungi, then they will have a very defined range within which they can live.
Okay.
And that range could be as low as narrow as, for example, 5.5 to 5.8. Beyond that, it's going to be able to live, but it's not really going to be able to function the way it normally would. Again, we're talking in analogies, but if you took someone like a person and you put them in a room with zero light, they will be able to live in there,
but not very
well. So that would be kind of an example there. Pretty horrible one. Sorry.
No, that's right. So I started thinking of, was it iRobot? No, I Am Legend. Those kind of people.
Yeah.
Or zombies. What this was, I'll finish up with this question. You've blown my mind away with all these. I can't believe how complex this is, but also how crazy and everything that's going on underneath. Actually, I did want to ask mycorrhizal fungi, because I know that's probably one of the main fungi that I know. That's a microbe that's in the soil, right? And that's probably one of the more important. Well, I don't know if that's right saying, but one more important ones. But
it's one of the ones that probably has received more
attention,
more time in the spotlight, so to speak, and for good reason. Mycorrhizal fungi are amazing organisms. I don't work with them myself, but I have worked with people who work with them. And in general, mycorrhizal fungi are really efficient at gathering nutrients for the plant. So they form these highly specialized and symbiotic relationships with so many different plant species. So certain plants can either form or not form symbiosis with mycorrhizal fungi. And when they do, they've evolved to form these symbioses. So when they are associated, these fungi can proliferate their hyphae, which is like, I guess, little tendrils or fingers, very far into the soil matrix and go and gather, nutrients for the plant. And, it's known that these things proliferate several meters away from the root,
Right.
away from the root. And they've been known to help plants with drought tolerance, because they'll go and fetch water from all these crazy distances, but also particularly for phosphorus solubilization. So plants can, the mycorrhizal fungi have ways in which they solubilize insoluble phosphate in the soil and make it bioavailable for the plant.
Jesus.
So there's magic going on all around us, but we are unaware, and maybe blissfully so.
Yeah. Do you think there's more microbes out there like that we just undiscovered?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. We've probably only just not even scratched the surface of what we know. There's so much that we don't know. And that's probably why, I want to do that.
Yeah.
That dream project. If time and money wasn't an issue, if I was an immortal with unimaginable wealth, that's what I would do for work. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully one day you might. Well, my last question. What is your least favorite? Is it, would I be saying microbe or microbiome? Like, because a microbiome is sort of a collection, right? So it'd be more like, what's your least favorite microbe?
What is my least favorite microbe? Can I think of one?
Is it going to be this crazy name of just letters and numbers, or?
No, I mean, they're specific examples, but I think I'm just trying to think of ones that I've cultured in the lab and they smell so bad. So that's the only reason.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
Like there's
it doesn't have to be a bad one. It can just be had a bad experience. Like now I got to try to think of a fish, but I know there's certain fish. Actually, probably my least favorite fish is the yellowtail grunter, but it's a pretty cool fish, very pretty, but I've just we catch so many of them and they're so spiky.
Yeah.
And it just sometimes makes our nights horrible. It's probably my least favorite, but so it doesn't actually have to be like a bad.
Yeah, I think it's more about the experience of certain of certain bacteria that they smell pretty bad, and I mean it makes sense.
All of them?
Many of them smell
nice
bad.
Smelling ones.
I'm sure there are ones that have like really good aromatic compounds that they release as volatiles. I'm sure there are. I haven't come across any bacteria that
do you think
that
they
are
smell
nice,
bad
pleasant smelling.
so we don't just start eating the soil?
I don't know if that's how they've evolved to.
Well,
to
it's probably how we've evolved, right? To smell like because we associate the smells that smell good.
But soil doesn't inherently smell bad, though.
No, it doesn't.
So soils can actually smell quite pleasant, sometimes even floral. Because they have so many other things in them, right? It's not just bacteria. It's, leaf litter and whatever else. But if you think of like an example of a disgusting example is someone with bad breath probably has a lot of bacteria that are in their mouths that are causing that bad breath. So when you look at all of these commercials for mouthwash, they usually are talking about getting rid of all your gross bacteria that are in your mouth that are causing all those smells.
Right. Yeah, my mum's just got me onto this natural mouthwash, which is supposed to not get rid of all your bacteria, I think, and just, I don't know, does something else.
Yeah, but maybe it's getting rid of some.
Yeah.
You can't,
Right. So what is your least favorite?
Anyone that smells bad, man. Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's where I'm leaving it at.
Yeah.
Because it's not.
I'm curious to know, what are the names? Can you just what are these names of microbes? Like, so mycorrhizal, what are some of these other names?
So the bacteria that I worked with in my PhD, it's called Rhizobium leguminosarum. So Rhizobium is the genus name, and there are many different rhizobia that all pretty much nodulate with.
Are they all
with
Latin
legumes.
names?
Oh, they all, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they all scientific names are Latin names. Yep.
Yeah. Is there? Do you have common names? We have common names for fish. That's
So the common name for the common name for Rhizobium leguminosarum is Rhizobia.
Okay.
It's not that far from its Latin name.
Oh, so there hasn't been any creativity with these, with the naming.
Partly because there's just too many. There's just too many different bacteria and fungi, or bacterial, fungal, and other microbial species out there for us to start getting creative with what they're called. Usually, the only time that we do start getting creative or give them a common name is when they have some ecological or economic significance to us. So there are a lot of diseases that have common names, but all of those diseases on plants, again, I'm not talking about humans, but on plants that they're caused by a specific fungal or bacterial pathogen, but we all know them by common names. So black spot is one example. And now I've just forgotten which organism causes it, but
Yeah.
But yeah, there are these examples of, I guess I'm giving bad examples of why we give common names, but I'm sure they're good ones.
Yeah, it's making sense. Like,
so penicillin, right?
Yeah.
Penicillin is very common. Everyone knows what penicillin is, but the organism where penicillin comes from is Penicillium. So, which is a fungus, but now I guess if you said Penicillium, they're like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure you mean
penicillin." Yeah.
And you're like, "No, I actually mean Penicillium because it's the one that produces penicillin."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I reckon you should come up with just a strange name, because then it would be like one of the only microbes, right? Or plant microbes with a cool name like the plant enhancer. I don't know.
I'll try, Kurt. I'll try my best. Yeah.
I've just gone way off track with that one. But thank you so much for coming in today. This has been great. I know I can see you every day in the lab. Well, in the offices, I should say, walking by. So it's been great to sort of delve into your research and see and try and understand this whole new world of microbiomes.
Thanks, Kurt. It's been great. It's been a good experience for me too. And I think I realize how much I don't know, but also maybe a little bit of how much I do know. So thanks.
You definitely a lot more than me anyway. Thank you.